think about the absolute last time, you said yes to a favor that you instantly, just viscerally knew you should have turned down.
Oh, yeah, that immediate dread.
Exactly. Like your mouth says, sure, yeah, no problem. I could absolutely handle that. But the very millisecond, the absolute second those words leave your lips, your brain just floods with cortisol.
Your heart rate actually ticks up.
Right. You feel that immediate sinking pit in your stomach. And you have to wonder, why does human biology practically force us to lie just to protect social harmony?
Yeah.
Even when it, actively destroys our own mental health and our focus.
It really is wild. You're here listening right now because you're a learner. You have this insatiable curiosity.
Yeah, you want to seize every opportunity.
Right. Master every skill, be the indispensable colleague, the perfect friend. But you are constantly slamming into this cold, undisputed reality of limited energy.
You only have 24 hours in a day. That's just math.
It is the great equalizer of the human condition. We are operating with this cognitive architecture designed for a prehistoric world, right? And we're trying to navigate a modern environment of just infinite demands.
Which is impossible.
Completely. The math simply does not work. You really cannot optimize your way out of a fundamentally finite 24-hour cycle, no matter how many life hacks you try.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We're unpacking the psychology, the biology, and the tactical application of setting boundaries. And this is all driven by the research and really fascinating source document we have today titled The Power of No, Reclaiming Focus and Setting Boundaries.
A fantastic piece of material.
It really is. And the premise here is that a tiny, two-letter word no is basically the ultimate master key to your sanity, your focus, and your ability to do deep, meaningful work.
And we really need to establish the stakes immediately here, because for you listening, this isn't about learning a cute productivity hack or some, corporate jargon for your next performance review.
Yeah, this isn't time blocking.
Right. The research we're examining frames saying no as the ultimate masterclass in self-preservation. This deep dive is custom tailored for anyone who has ever felt that creeping chronic exhaustion of being perpetually overcommitted.
Oh, that feeling of running at 100 miles an hour, but never actually moving forward on your own priorities, just spinning your wheels.
Exactly. Spread completely too thin.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, the intellectual concept of saying no is easy.
Sure, on paper.
Yeah, anyone can understand it on paper. But when you are actually standing in front of another human being, looking them right in the eye, that tiny word feels completely terrifying to use.
It feels dangerous.
Yes. It feels like pulling the pin on a grenade.
Yeah.
So before we talk about the tactics of how to actually set boundaries, we have to look at the invisible forces that practically hold us hostage. The things that force that default yes right out of our mouths.
To understand that, we really have to look at how deeply ingrained our behavioral conditioning actually is. The literature points out that this starts practically from the moment we're born.
Like in childhood.
Exactly. We are actively socialized, heavily incentivized, and just constantly rewarded for being agreeable.
Think about the entire structure of, early childhood education.
Right. Compliance is the ultimate virtue.
Yeah, the child who says yes and just goes along with the group is praised. They're a good listener or a team player.
And the child who asserts a boundary, the one who actually says no, they are very quickly labeled as difficult or obstinate or a troublemaker.
Right. The whole gold star system in school is entirely built on overriding your own preferences for the convenience of the authority figure.
Exactly.
So by the time we reach adulthood and, enter the workforce, the act of saying no has been completely pathologized in our own minds. It just feels inherently selfish.
Well, it feels selfish because it triggers a really deeply rooted evolutionary fear. We are fundamentally social creatures. If we go back a few thousand years, our survival literally depended on our inclusion in the tribe.
You couldn't just survive on your own.
No, absolutely not. If you disrupted the harmony of your small hunter-gatherer group, you weren't just, sent to your room, you were exiled.
And exile meant death.
Literally.
Yeah.
Death by starvation or predation. The thing is, the amygdala, the fear center of your brain, it hasn't updated its software for the modern office environment.
Okay, that is wild. So let me get this straight. When my boss drops a massive, totally unreasonable project on my desk at 4:55 p.m. on a Friday.
The classic Friday afternoon ambush.
Right. And I feel that huge urge to say no. My modern logical brain knows I just want to go home and watch Netflix. But my Paleolithic lizard brain is screaming, if you reject the tribe leader, you will be cast out into the frozen tundra to die.
Precisely. That is exactly what's happening physiologically. Your nervous system literally cannot tell the difference between a threat to your social standing in the office and a threat to your biological survival. Yeah, it perceives the potential disappointment of your boss, or even just a friend, as a life or death crisis. This is why we have such a visceral, intense physiological reaction to the mere thought of boundary setting.
It's not just in our heads, it's in our bodies. And, it's not just the immediate interpersonal friction in that one moment either. The research heavily emphasizes the concept of FOMO.
The fear of missing out, yeah.
Right. But specifically, how FOMO weaponizes our ambition in a professional context.
Oh, FOMO in the workplace is, well, it's incredibly insidious.
It's not like missing a fun college party.
No, exactly. It's not that teenage anxiety. It is this paralyzing, career-driven fear that opportunities are incredibly scarce.
Like there's only one train leaving the station?
Yeah, and the psychological trap is this belief that if you, turn down this one single project,
or even just refuse to sit on some extraneous planning committee.
right, that you will instantly be labeled as not hungry enough or not a team player. The fear is that the door won't just close on this one opportunity, but that you are permanently locking yourself out of all future opportunities.
Which creates this environment where yes basically acts like conversational gravity.
That's a great way to put it.
It's the path of least immediate resistance.
Yeah.
You're asked a question, and the overwhelming weight of the social expectation, combined with that evolutionary terror of exile we just talked about, it just pulls the yes right out of your mouth.
Before you even realize what you're saying.
Yeah. But let me push back on this framework for a second here.
Sure.
If being agreeable, right, if maintaining the cohesion of the group is a fundamental human survival trait to stay in the tribe, aren't we basically fighting against our own biology when we try to say no? Is it even a realistic goal to try and rewrite millions of years of evolutionary programming?
What's fascinating here is that, yes, you are fighting your biology, but here is the critical distinction the source research makes. You are fighting an outdated biological heuristic.
Outdated, because we aren't on the savannah anymore.
Exactly. What kept you alive on the savannah is actively killing your cognitive capacity in the modern information age. The literature describes this as a cocktail of fears.
A cocktail. I like that. What's in it?
Well, you have the fear of disappointing people, the fear of interpersonal conflict, the fear of being disliked, and that professional FOMO we just mentioned. They're all swirling together. And when you drink that cocktail, your biology just screams at you to choose the path of least immediate resistance.
Just say yes. Make the bad feeling go away.
Right. Avoid the immediate threat and just figure it out later.
Survive the next 5 seconds of the conversation at all costs.
Exactly. Survive the interaction. But the profound psychological error here, and the research is very clear on this, is that the path of least immediate resistance is a complete illusion. Well, we tell ourselves we are avoiding conflict by saying yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's the whole point. But we aren't avoiding conflict at all. We are simply internalizing it.
Oh, wow. That is a staggering way to frame it. We aren't avoiding the friction. We're just swallowing it.
Precisely. You take the external friction that would have existed between you and the person making the request, and you just absorb it directly into your own nervous system.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And I want you, the listener, to seriously evaluate this dynamic in your own life right now. Think about a recent time you agreed to a massive favor purely out of guilt, or, a fear of closing a door.
When you had zero time.
Zero time, zero desire to do it. You literally just said yes to avoid an awkward conversation.
Right.
Did the anxiety actually go away? Or did it immediately mutate into a low-grade chronic dread that infected every other part of your week as the deadline approached?
Oh, it absolutely mutates. It becomes this awful heavyweight. You wake up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, thinking about the thing you agreed to do.
Yep, the 3 a.m. panic.
Which, honestly, transitions us perfectly into the next major concept the research tackles, which is the hidden costs. Because the social relief of saying yes is instantaneous, right? Your boss smiles, your colleague is relieved, the social harmony is preserved.
Everything looks fine on the outside.
Yeah, but it's essentially a payday loan.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Right. You get the immediate cash of social approval, but the interest rate on the back end is absolutely ruinous, and the bill always comes due.
It always comes due. And the currency we use to pay off those forced yeses is our finite cognitive bandwidth. It's our physical health. It's our emotional stability.
Okay with ourselves?
Exactly. Every time you say yes out of fear, you are forcibly extracting resources from other, much more important areas of your life.
And I think the most fascinating and frankly toxic byproduct of this entire dynamic is resentment.
Yes. Resentment is a huge factor.
It is such a bizarre psychological quirk, if you think about it, because we are the ones who said yes. We had the autonomy, even if it felt socially pressured. It's not like anybody literally held a weapon to our heads.
Right. We consented to it.
Yeah. And yet, the moment we are actually in the middle of doing the task we agreed to do, we become utterly consumed with anger toward the person who asked us.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really the ultimate psychological irony. Resentment, in this context, is entirely misplaced self-anger.
Self-anger. Because we're mad we caved.
Exactly. We are furious with ourselves for failing to protect our own boundaries. But because acknowledging our own weakness is incredibly painful, we project that anger outward.
We need a bad guy.
Right. We villainize the requester. We tell ourselves, how dare they ask this of me? Can't they see how busy I am? They are totally taking advantage of me.
When really they just asked a question.
Exactly. The hard truth of the literature is that they didn't cross a boundary. You just never built the fence. Yeah, you left the front door wide open and then got angry when someone walked inside.
That is incredibly confrontational, but so necessary to hear. I mean, we expect other people to magically intuit our stress levels and just manage our workload for us.
Which is an impossible expectation. People will naturally advocate for their own priorities. It is your absolute responsibility to advocate for your own limits.
Because nobody else is going to do it for you.
Exactly. And when you fail to do that, when you expect others to manage your boundaries, you enter a state of chronic energetic deficit.
I want to move away from the typical bank account metaphors people usually use here. Like the idea of writing checks you can't cash. Let's look at this biologically or physically. It's really more like a lithium-ion battery in a smartphone, right?
Okay, I like where this is going.
Like if you constantly drain a phone battery all the way down to absolute 0% every single day, and you never let it sit on a charger to properly trickle charge back to full.
The battery degrades.
Yes. It doesn't just get empty. Its actual fundamental maximum capacity permanently degrades. Eventually, it can only hold a 60% charge, then a 40% charge.
That is a highly accurate physiological analogy for what the medical and psychological communities call burnout.
Right. Because burnout isn't just being tired.
Not at all. Burnout is not just being tired. It is a profound dysregulation of the HPA axis. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis in your brain.
The stress center.
Right. When you are perpetually overextended, your body is bathed in this constant low-level stream of stress hormones, like cortisol. And over time, the structural integrity of your nervous system actually begins to fray.
So the battery is actually physically damaged.
Yes. The research emphasizes that burnout is a state of complete physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, where your baseline capacity has fundamentally degraded. You can't just sleep for a weekend and bounce back.
Right. A nap won't fix a broken battery.
Exactly. Your internal battery is damaged.
And the behavioral loop that causes this battery damage, what psychologists call the disease to please, it acts exactly like an addiction.
It acts like an addiction because fundamentally it's a trauma response. Specifically, a fawning response.
Fawning, like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Yes. You are attempting to control the emotional state of the people around you by sacrificing your own needs. You're constantly scanning the environment to make sure nobody is upset with you.
Just constantly hypervigilant.
Exactly.
But the real tragedy of the disease to please, the really sad irony, is that it actually destroys the very thing it's trying to protect.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the underlying motivation here. You say yes because you are desperate to protect the relationship, right? To be seen as reliable, to maintain a positive connection.
Yeah, you want them to like you.
But look at the actual outcome. Because you are spread so incredibly thin, the quality of your work plummets. You start dropping balls.
You make mistakes.
You become physically exhausted, irritable, cynical, and worst of all, you are radiating that suppressed resentment we just talked about.
Oh, people can feel that.
They absolutely can. Your tone becomes passive-aggressive. You start emotionally withdrawing from the person you're supposed to be helping. So the relationship degrades anyway, but it degrades in a much more toxic, drawn-out way than if you had just said no in the first place.
Wow. So the default yes is a complete trap. It leads to battery degradation, deep resentment, and the destruction of the exact relationships we were trying to save.
It is a lose-lose scenario.
So how do we escape this? I mean, if saying yes is biologically wired into us and saying no feels like a social death sentence, how do we begin to act differently without feeling like complete villains?
The only way out is a fundamental structural paradigm shift in how we understand language and opportunity cost. We have to completely strip the word no of its negative emotional baggage.
Because right now, I think the average person perceives no purely as an act of rejection, like a door slamming shut in someone's face.
Correct. But the psychological reframing required here, and this is a major focal point in the source material, is to realize that no is not an act of rejection. It is an act of prioritization. It is an act of fierce protection.
Wait, break that down for me. How is no protective? That sounds almost counterintuitive.
Well, we have to borrow a concept from economics here.
Ouch.
Opportunity cost.
Okay.
Every single choice you make has a cost, which is the value of the next best alternative that you had to give up. So applied to our psychology and our calendar, it means this. Every single time you say no to one thing, you are by definition saying yes to something else.
Right. Because you freed up the time.
Exactly. And inversely, every time you say yes to something, you are unknowingly saying no to 100 other things.
Okay, this is the paradigm shift right here. So if I say yes to an extraneous Friday afternoon meeting, I am actually saying no to the deep, uninterrupted focus work I had planned to do.
Yes.
I'm saying no to leaving the office on time. I am saying no to being fully present and energized for my family when I finally walk in the door.
Precisely. You are never just saying yes to the isolated request. You are exchanging a piece of your finite battery life. The research emphasizes that you have to make the invisible yes visible.
The invisible yes. I like that.
When you say no to a colleague's request to take over a project you don't have time for, you aren't just rejecting them. You are actively, consciously saying yes to maintaining the high quality of work on your current projects.
You're protecting your current commitments.
You are saying yes to your own sanity. Your no is the protective shield that guards your yes.
I love that framing. Your no is the protective shield that guards your yes. Because if you don't have a shield, everything gets attacked. Your time, your focus, your energy.
It all gets depleted.
The literature also touches on the idea that if you are a chronic people pleaser, your yes essentially suffers from hyperinflation. Like it becomes completely valueless.
Oh, it's basic supply and demand.
Right.
If your yes is given away freely, just automatically, to literally everyone who asks, it carries absolutely no weight. It signifies nothing about your actual commitment or passion for a project.
It just means you were asked.
Exactly. It only signifies your inability to tolerate social friction. People learn that they can just dump tasks on you. But, and here's the flip side, when you are fiercely discerning, when you say no 90% of the time, the one thing you actually say yes to receives the full, concentrated force of your intellect and your energy.
So your yes actually means something.
Your yes becomes incredibly potent. The literature uses a powerful metaphor here. You must become the ultimate gatekeeper of your own capacity.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let me play devil's advocate for a second, because I know this is where the theory hits a brick wall for a lot of people.
Go for it.
If I become this ruthless gatekeeper, right, standing on the walls of my citadel, aggressively vetting every single request that comes my way and saying no to almost everything, don't I just become an island?
That's a very common fear.
Don't I risk completely isolating myself? Like, the fear is that people will just stop asking. I'll be the person with the locked gate who no one wants to work with or invite to dinner.
This raises an important question, and it's a very valid anxiety, but it really misinterprets the role of a gatekeeper.
How so?
A gatekeeper's job isn't to weld the gate shut and declare a permanent quarantine.
Right.
A gatekeeper's job is simply to ensure that only the right things get inside the walls. It is about curation, not isolation.
Curation.
Yes. Think about it. If you let every single traveler into the Citadel without ever checking their intent, your resources are depleted, the city is overrun, and you can't protect anyone.
You run out of food in a day.
Exactly. By keeping the gate, you guarantee that when you do welcome someone inside, when you do commit to a project or a relationship, you have the abundant resources to give them the absolute royal treatment.
That makes a lot of sense.
You aren't isolating yourself. You are ensuring that your connections and your work are of the highest possible quality.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Curation over quarantine. I really like that. But, now we have to move from the philosophical to the highly tactical.
Let's do it.
Because it is wonderful to sit here in a studio and talk about opportunity cost and being a gatekeeper. But out in the real world, the friction is real. Let's create a scenario.
Okay, lay it out.
Let's say my boss, who has a bit of a history of pushing boundaries, corners me in the hallway.
Classic.
Yeah. And they want me to take a lead on a new initiative that I absolutely know will ruin my weekends for the next 2 months.
My battery's already at 20%. I
Right.
know the theory. I know my no protects my yes. But in that actual terrifying moment, what are the specific mechanics of pushing back?
This is exactly where the research transitions into a tactical masterclass, because a blunt, flat no can trigger defensive reactions in the other person, especially a boss.
Yeah, you don't want to just yell no in their face.
Right. The goal is to set an ironclad boundary while preserving the relationship capital. We aren't trying to burn the building down. We just want to lock our office door. Okay, I'm with you.
The literature outlines 4 escalating strategies to handle exactly this kind of friction.
Okay, let's play this out. My boss pitches the horrible weekend-destroying project.
Yeah.
What is my first tactical option?
The first, most diplomatic approach is what the research calls clear but kind.
Clear but kind.
Yes. And the precise phrasing suggested is, thank you so much for thinking of me for this, but I don't have the capacity right now to give it the attention it deserves.
Wow, that is incredibly smooth. Let's dissect the neurolinguistics of that sentence because it's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It really is.
First, thank you so much for thinking of me. You are leading with validation.
Yes. You are instantly soothing the other person's amygdala. By thanking them, you are signaling, I respect you, our social bond is intact, I recognize this is an important request. You completely disarm any potential hostility before you deliver the rejection.
And then the boundary itself. I don't have the capacity right now. This is brilliant because you are making up a highly specific, verifiable excuse. You aren't saying, oh, I have to take my cat to the vet every Saturday.
Exactly, and that is crucial. When you give a specific logistical excuse, you invite the other person into a problem-solving mindset.
They'll try to fix it for you.
Right. They will try to find a way around your excuse. But capacity is an unassailable internal metric. Only you know your capacity. It is a statement of physiological and cognitive fact.
You can't argue with someone's capacity.
You really can't. And the landing of that sentence to give it the attention it deserves is the ultimate diplomatic masterstroke.
Because it makes it about them.
Yes, you are actually elevating their project. You are saying, this initiative is so important, it would be highly irresponsible of me to take it on when I can't give it 100%. You are aligning your boundary with their goal of a successful project.
That is masterful. Okay, but what if I am so caught off guard by the request that my brain just completely freezes? Like, I know I shouldn't say yes, but I just can't formulate that perfectly diplomatic sentence in the moment. The pressure of them staring at me is just too intense.
That happens all the time. And when it does, you immediately deploy the second strategy, buying time.
Buying time.
The phrasing is incredibly simple. That sounds really interesting. Let me check my calendar and get back to you by the end of the day.
I have used this one, and I compare it to building a conversational airlock into your interactions, like on a deep-sea submarine or a spaceship.
An airlock, I like that.
Yeah, because you can't just throw open the door to the crushing pressure of the ocean. You'd be destroyed.
Yeah.
You need a buffer zone to slowly depressurize. When someone springs a demand on you, the social pressure to comply is literally crushing. So, let me check my calendar, steps you into the airlock.
That is a phenomenal metaphor, because the immediate knee-jerk yes is driven entirely by the autonomic nervous system, your fight, flight, or fawn response.
It's pure panic.
Right, so by deploying the airlock phrase, you are forcing a mandatory pause. You are shifting the cognitive load from the primitive reactive part of your brain to the prefrontal cortex, which handles your executive function and logical planning.
You get to step away.
You escape the physical gaze of the requester, you sit down at your desk, you breathe, and you actually look at your battery levels. You give yourself the psychological safety to evaluate if this is a strategic yes or a required no.
Okay, but let's escalate the scenario. Let's say I use the airlock. I go back to my desk, I look at my calendar, and I realize I absolutely cannot take on the whole project. But my boss is in a really tough spot. I want to help, but I cannot sacrifice my weekends. Is there a middle ground here?
There is, and it's the third strategy, the partial yes, or offering a highly defined alternative.
How does that sound?
The research suggests phrasing like, I am completely booked and cannot lead this initiative, but I can offer an hour on Tuesday to help brainstorm the initial strategy.
Oh, this completely breaks the binary illusion.
Yes, it does.
Because we are so often trapped in thinking we either have to swallow the entire massive project or tell our boss to go jump in a lake. There's no in-between in our heads.
It leverages the psychology of negotiation.
Yeah.
You are demonstrating that you are a collaborative team player. You are offering tangible value and support. But, and this is the key, you are doing it exclusively on terms that you control.
Right.
You are dictating the exact perimeter of the boundary. You give an inch, but you make it explicitly clear that the inch is all there is. It protects your core capacity while maintaining excellent political capital in the office.
All right, let's take this to the absolute limit. What if the boss is a chronic boundary pusher?
They exist.
Yeah, they do. What if I try the partial yes and they say, no, I really need you to just own the whole thing. It'll only take a few extra hours. Come on, be a team player. What is the final tactical option when diplomacy just completely fails?
When diplomacy is actively ignored, you move to the fourth strategy, which is often the most terrifying for people to use. Brevity, or the complete lack of justification.
No justification.
None. The exact phrase is, I'm sorry, but that is simply not going to work for me right now. And then you stop talking.
Full stop. Just silence.
Absolute silence. The old adage holds true here. No is a complete sentence.
I have a theory about this, actually. Specifically about why that silence is so terrifying and why we usually do the exact opposite.
Let's hear it.
When people feel pressured, they reject the request, but then they immediately start bleeding reasons. They launch into this massive rambling justification like, I can't do it because my kids have soccer and my car has been making a weird noise and I have a headache, and I call it bleeding in a shark tank.
Bleeding in a shark tank. Okay, explain the mechanics of that.
Well, if you are dealing with a boundary pusher, basically a shark, the absolute worst thing you can do is give them reasons. Reasons are just blood the water.
Right.
Because the moment you offer a specific logistical excuse, you have fundamentally invited them to argue with your premise. If I say, I can't stay late, I have to pick up my kids, the shark says, oh, can't your partner do it today? If I say, my car is in the shop, the shark says, no worries, I'll pay for your Uber home. You bleed reasons, and the shark just effortlessly swims around, devouring them, solving all your problems for you until you are completely cornered and have absolutely no logical choice left but to say yes.
That is an incredibly astute observation, and it perfectly aligns with the psychological literature on boundary setting. Why do we bleed those reasons? We do it because of immense internalized guilt.
We feel bad.
We feel incredibly guilty for asserting our own needs, so we frantically try to construct this elaborate, airtight legal defense to prove to the other person that we aren't bad people. We just, logically, physically cannot comply. We are essentially seeking their permission to say no.
Yes, we want them to say, oh, wow, you are so busy, I totally understand, I absolve you of your guilt.
But boundary pushers will never give you that absolution. They will use a technique often referred to as DARVO.
DARVO.
Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender, or simply aggressive problem solving to dismantle your defense. This is why brevity is the ultimate weapon. When you simply say, that won't work for me, and offer zero blood in the water, there is nothing for the shark to bite.
There's nothing to argue with.
Exactly. Brevity projects unshakable confidence. It implicitly communicates. My decision is made, it is inherently valid, it does not require your approval, and it is absolutely not open for negotiation.
But the silence is hard.
The silence that follows is deeply uncomfortable, yes. But you must let the other person sit in that discomfort rather than rushing to fill it with your own justifications.
Okay, so we have a pretty formidable arsenal now. We have the diplomatic, clear but kind, the nervous system regulator of buying time, the negotiation of the partial yes, and the iron wall of brevity.
A very solid toolkit.
But to truly internalize these strategies, the research document does something really fascinating. It doesn't just give you the phrases, it focuses heavily on the underlying cognitive linguistics. It provides a highly specific vocabulary of limits.
And this is arguably the most important part of the entire framework, because language dictates reality.
Right.
The psychological concept of linguistic determinism suggests that if you do not have the precise words to describe a phenomenon, it is incredibly difficult for your brain to conceptualize it, let alone manage or alter it.
So let's look at the specific terms the literature highlights, not just as dictionary definitions, but as cognitive tools. The first one is the phrase, to be spread too thin.
On the surface, it's a common idiom, but psychologically, it speaks directly to the concept of cognitive load theory.
Cognitive load.
Yes. Your working memory and your executive function have strict physiological limits. When you are spread too thin, you are attempting to process too many parallel tasks. Your brain has to constantly switch contexts, which drains massive amounts of glucose and neural energy.
So it's a physical drain.
Absolutely. By giving this a name, you recognize that your degraded performance isn't a moral failing or a lack of willpower. It is a structural failure of trying to stretch a finite resource over too broad an area.
It pulls it out of the realm of, I'm just not working hard enough, and into, I have exceeded the physical limitations of the material. Like stretching a rubber band too far.
Perfect analogy.
The next crucial term in this vocabulary is the knee-jerk reaction.
We touched on this briefly with the airlock metaphor. In medical terms, a knee-jerk is a reflex arc that bypasses the brain entirely.
Right? The doctor taps your knee with a little hammer.
Yes. The doctor hits your patellar tendon, the signal goes to your spinal cord, and your leg kicks before your conscious brain is even aware it happened.
Which is exactly what happens when someone asks a chronic people-pleaser for a favor. The yes is just a spinal reflex.
Exactly. Behavioral psychologists like Daniel Kahneman talk about System 1 and System 2 thinking.
Okay, remind me of the difference.
System 1 is fast, automatic, and emotional. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and logical. The knee-jerk yes is a System 1 override driven by social anxiety.
It just blurts out.
Right. So by actively labeling the urge to say yes as a knee-jerk reaction, you create a microsecond of meta-awareness. You recognize, my spinal cord is talking right now, not my executive function. I need to engage System 2.
Which leads us perfectly to the concept of capacity. We've used that word a lot today, but why is it so vital as a standalone vocabulary word?
Because capacity shifts the conversation away from time. People often say, I don't have the time, but time is objective and arguably negotiable.
Yeah, if someone says they don't have time, a boundary pusher will just say, we'll just do this weekend. You have time then.
Exactly. But capacity encompasses emotional bandwidth, cognitive load, and physical energy. It is the absolute maximum volumetric limit of what you can safely hold without breaking. It is a holistic measurement of your inner resources.
You can't debate someone's capacity. And finally, the overarching concept to set boundaries.
A boundary is simply the property line of your own life. It dictates where you end and the rest of the world begins.
A property line. I like that.
Without a clear linguistic framework for what a boundary is, people tend to view any resistance to their demands as a personal attack. Naming it allows you to view it objectively. You are not attacking them, you are simply patrolling the perimeter of your own well-being.
So what does this all mean? By internalizing this specific vocabulary capacity, cognitive load, knee-jerk reflexes, we're essentially upgrading our mental operating system. We're installing the diagnostic tools required to recognize the bugs in our own behavioral programming in real time.
Precisely. You move off of autopilot. You reclaim the steering wheel of your own intentionality.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, let's synthesize the massive paradigm shift we've explored today. The default, biologically driven yes is a trap of least resistance that leads directly to battery degradation, silent resentment, and the ultimate destruction of the quality of your work and your relationships.
And the antidote to that toxicity is redefining the word no. Saying no is not a moment of interpersonal conflict. It is not an act of selfishness or cruel rejection. It is fundamentally a moment of profound, clarifying prioritization.
It is the exact moment you actively choose to protect your finite capacity. You are choosing your long-term health, your peace of mind, and the deep integrity of your commitments over the fleeting, deeply temporary discomfort of disappointing someone else's expectations.
Well said.
It is a superpower that, when cultivated and practiced, allows you to reclaim vast, untapped reserves of your own life.
And like any superpower or any physical muscle, it requires resistance training. The research challenges you to start small.
And that is our call to action for you, the listener. Take this out of the realm of theoretical psychology and put it into the physical world this week. Find one incredibly small, low-stakes opportunity to practice saying no.
Just one.
Maybe it's declining a meeting where your presence is purely optical and not functional. Maybe it's telling a friend you can't make it to a crowded happy hour because you just need to rest. Step into the airlock. Do not bleed in the shark tank. Deliver the boundary with grace and brevity, and simply observe how it feels to survive the friction.
Observe the anxiety spike, watch it pass, and then deeply observe the profound space and peace that the no creates for a much more meaningful yes.
But as we leave you today, I want you to mull over a final, slightly provocative thought that takes everything we've just discussed and turns the mirror inward. We've spent this entire deep dive rigorously analyzing the mechanics of saying no to the endless demands of the outside world.
Right, external demands.
We've talked about bosses, colleagues, friends, and the external pressure to maintain the tribe. But consider this. As you become the ultimate fierce gatekeeper of your own capacity, what happens when the most demanding, the most relentless, the most critically overextending voice in your life isn't a manipulative boss or a needy friend? What if the shark in the tank is you?
That is a very complex and uncomfortable question.
You are listening to this because you are driven. You have your own massive expectations, your own internal FOMO, your own desperate desire to optimize every waking second of your life. So how do you take these exact same tactical tools and turn them inward? How do you master the art of saying no to your own impossible ambitions, your own perfectionism, and your own relentless drive so you can finally carve out the capacity to say yes to simply being, something to deeply consider as you go through your week. Until next time.
You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of, like, real precision.
Oh, absolutely. Like mathematical precision almost.
Right. Like engineering. You break your arm, you go to the hospital, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is, that's the problem.
It's binary. It's either broken or it's not broken.
Exactly.
You can point to the physical reality of the damage, and that visibility is deeply comforting to the human brain. We really like things to be visible. We like things to be categorized and, most importantly, to have a clear, linear solution.
But then you step into the world of human psychology and specifically into the incredibly messy arena of setting personal boundaries.
Oh, yeah. The messiest.
And suddenly that x-ray machine is just broken. We're looking at an emotional landscape that is murky, to say the least.
Murky is a great word for it.
Right. Because the damage isn't a clean break. It's completely invisible. And I think the worst part is it usually happens in the absolute dead silence right after you utter a single two-letter word.
No.
No. Just saying, it makes me stressed out. So if you are sitting in your car right now, gripping the steering wheel, prepping for a crucial meeting where you need to set some firm limits.
Or if you're just, insanely curious about the weird self-sabotaging quirks of human psychology.
Yes. Then this deep dive into our source material today is custom tailored for you. Our goal today is to really help you reclaim your time and, frankly, reclaim your sanity.
And the source material we are working with today, it's an incredibly insightful conversational guide titled Mastering the Aftermath, The Art of Saying No. It's just a fantastic foundation for that goal.
It really is.
Because it tackles the exact moment the x-ray machine breaks.
So let's establish the mission for today right up front. I mean, we have all heard the standard advice, right?
The boundary setting 101 stuff.
Exactly. We've heard the cliche that saying no to one thing is actually saying yes to something more important. It's about prioritization over rejection.
Which is true,
But today's mission is entirely about the aftermath. What on earth actually happens after the word no leaves your mouth?
because the act of saying no is really just the catalyst. It's the reaction, both internal and external, that we actually have to live with.
Yeah.
And that reaction is where the vast majority of people completely abandon their boundaries.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's set the stage with a scenario that I think every single person listening has experienced at least once.
Sure.
You've been hyping yourself up for days to have a difficult conversation. You finally mustered the courage to look someone in the eye, like a coworker or a friend or maybe a family member, and you decline their request. You say no.
You did it.
You did it.
Yeah.
But instead of feeling this wave of immense relief and liberation, you're suddenly drowning.
Drowning in guilt.
Yes, exactly. You're imagining your boss glaring at you, your family is throwing a massive guilt trip your way, and you are lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if you just completely ruined your career or alienated your loved ones.
The classic 2 a.m. panic.
It's the worst. So how do we survive that specific fallout?
Well, that 2 a.m. panic is a universal experience. And it's precisely why we have to start our analysis by looking inward. Before we even address the boss or the family or the persistent coworkers, we have to confront that immediate, agonizing, physiological feeling that hits your chest the second you establish a boundary.
Oh, man. The text has a great name for this.
It does. It calls this phenomenon the no-guilt hangover, or dealing with the emotional residue.
The no-guilt hangover. I read that phrase in the source material, and it instantly clicked for me.
It's very evocative.
Because a hangover isn't just a mental state, it's a profound physical state. When this hits, it's not just a passing thought. Your chest gets tight, your breathing gets shallow, your stomach is literally in knots.
It's a full-body experience.
Yeah. Why does our body react like that?
It's a systemic physiological cascade. And to understand why this happens, we have to look at the evolutionary mechanics of the human brain.
Okay, let's get into the biology.
So we are fundamentally social creatures. For hundreds of thousands of years, our survival depended entirely on our inclusion in a tribe.
Right. You couldn't survive alone in the wilderness.
Exactly. If you displeased the tribe, if you were perceived as uncooperative or selfish, you were cast out. And in the ancestral environment, being cast out meant certain death. You would either starve or be eaten by a predator.
So our brains literally evolved to view social displeasure as a life or death threat.
Precisely. The part of our brain responsible for detecting threats, the amygdala, it's very ancient. It does not know the difference between a charging saber-toothed tiger and, say, a disappointed coworker who just asked you to cover their weekend shift.
That is wild.
When you say no, you are inevitably causing a moment of displeasure or inconvenience for the other person. Your brain registers their displeasure, cross-references it with that ancient survival code, and just sounds the alarm.
So it floods your system with stress hormones.
Yes. Cortisol and adrenaline. That tight chest, the sweating, the racing thoughts. That is literally your body preparing to fight for its life because it thinks you are about to be exiled from the tribe.
Oh, wow. That completely explains the intensity of the physical reaction. It's not just you being weak, it's your biology kicking in.
Exactly.
But the source makes a really vital distinction here about how we interpret that physical reaction. Because when we feel that awful physical cocktail of stress hormones, our conscious brain tries to make sense of it.
Right. It looks for a reason.
And it usually arrives at the conclusion, I feel terrible, therefore I must have done something morally wrong.
And this is where the text makes a brilliant separation between two very different types of guilt. We have legitimate guilt and we have social conditioning.
Yeah.
Our failure to distinguish between these two is the root cause of the no-guilt hangover.
Okay, let's define the difference for the listener, because this is huge.
It really is.
So, if I understand the source correctly, legitimate guilt is the appropriate emotional response to actually doing something wrong. It's your moral compass functioning correctly.
Right.
Like, if I lie to a friend, if I steal something, if I back my car into my neighbor's mailbox and just drive away, I should feel that knot in my stomach. I caused objective harm.
Exactly. That is your ethical software working exactly as intended. Legitimate guilt is necessary for a functioning society. We need that.
Sure.
But the guide points out that the vast majority of the guilt we feel when setting personal boundaries does not fall into this category at all. It falls into the category of social conditioning.
Okay, break that down.
This is the guilt you feel not because you have caused objective harm, but simply because you have disrupted someone else's expectations. You've done something they dislike.
That is a massive paradigm shift. You haven't done something wrong. You've just done something someone else dislikes.
Yes, and we are conditioned from childhood to equate the two. We are taught to be accommodating. The good child is the quiet child, the helpful child, the one who doesn't rock the boat.
Right, the one who always says yes.
We are subjected to decades of positive reinforcement for subordinating our own needs to the needs of others. So when you finally say no, you are breaking that deeply ingrained social contract.
And your brain freaks out.
Your conditioned brain interprets their displeasure as your moral failure, and it triggers the guilt response. But it's a false alarm. It is merely social conditioning masquerading as legitimate moral failure.
Wait, conceptually, logically, I completely agree with this separation.
Sure.
But how does that logic actually help you in the moment? Like when your boss asks you to work the weekend and you decline and your heart is pounding out of your chest, how do you rationally tell yourself, oh, this is just a false alarm based on childhood conditioning, when your body is actively screaming that you are in mortal danger?
Right, because logic usually goes right out the window when the amygdala takes over. That is the central challenge. Because the physical sensation of both types of guilt, legitimate and conditioned, is identical.
The cortisol doesn't care about the origin story.
Exactly. The cortisol is just doing its job. This is why the source provides a specific tactical response. You cannot logic your way out of a physiological response, but you can redirect it.
Okay, how?
When that hangover hits, the primary tactic is to actively reconnect with the yes that you are protecting. And the text emphasizes that you must actually vocalize it to yourself.
Vocalizing it, so I can't just think it, I have to say it out loud.
Yes, saying it out loud engages different neural pathways. It forces your prefrontal cortex, the logical executive functioning part of your brain, to override the primal panic of the limbic system.
Oh, that makes sense.
You don't just sit in the guilt.
Yeah.
You counter it with purpose. You say out loud, I feel incredibly guilty right now, but I said no because my family needed me this evening. Or, I feel sick to my stomach, but I said no to protect my own mental health.
You explicitly link the uncomfortable no to the highly valuable yes. You are giving your brain a new narrative to process the physical sensation. You are giving the pain a purpose.
You are reframing the discomfort as a necessary temporary cost for a much greater benefit.
This connects perfectly to an analogy the text uses, and I love this one. It refers to the guilt muscle.
Yes, such a good visualization.
Think about going to the gym and lifting weights for the very first time in your life. You do a heavy workout, and the next morning you wake up and your muscles are just screaming. You can barely lift your arms.
Right, you're so sore you can't even put a shirt on.
Exactly. Now, if you didn't understand the mechanics of exercise, you would feel that intense pain and think, I have severely injured myself. I have done something terribly wrong to my body, and I must never touch a dumbbell again. You would interpret the pain as a warning sign of damage.
Which is exactly how we interpret the emotional pain of saying no. We feel the discomfort and assume the relationship is broken or that we are a bad person.
But because we understand exercise, we know the soreness isn't an injury. It's the physical sensation of a muscle breaking down so it can rebuild stronger. It's the unfamiliar burn of new growth.
Right.
Saying no operates on the exact same principle. The soreness you feel the next day, that no guilt hangover, isn't legitimate guilt. It's not an injury to your moral character.
No, not
It
at
is
all.
just the unfamiliar burn of a brand new boundary being built.
Yeah.
It's the social conditioning muscle being stretched in a way it isn't used to.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, especially when we view it through the lens of neuroplasticity.
Oh, tell me more about that.
So every time you behave in a certain way, like automatically saying yes to please someone, you are strengthening a specific neural pathway in your brain. It becomes like a deeply rutted highway.
It's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. When you finally say no, you are forcing your brain off that comfortable highway and hacking your way through the dense jungle of a new neural pathway. Of course it's uncomfortable. It takes immense cognitive energy.
But what happens if you keep lifting weights? What happens if you keep walking that new path in the jungle?
The soreness fades, the path gets clearer, your body adapts to the load.
So it actually gets easier physically.
Yes, the scientific term is myelination. As you repeat the boundary-setting behavior, your brain builds a fatty substance called myelin around that new neural pathway, insulating it and making the electrical signal travel faster and easier.
That is fascinating.
The first few times you establish a firm boundary, the guilt muscle will be intensely sore. But with practice, you actually physically alter the structure of your brain. You learn to tolerate the discomfort because you recognize it for what it is. Growth, not damage.
So the takeaway for you listening right now is this. You must learn to tolerate the discomfort. Do not run from the hangover. Vocalize your internal yes out loud. Remind yourself what you are protecting, and trust that the soreness is just a sign that you are building a boundary. The pain will fade.
It's a fundamental internal recalibration. But as the source material quickly points out, the internal battle is really only half the equation.
Oh, right, because other people exist.
Exactly. You can successfully manage your own guilt, but the world does not always respect your internal recalibration.
Oh, isn't that the truth? You can sit there quietly managing your guilt, breathing through the discomfort, convincing yourself that you did the right thing. But what happens when the external pressure absolutely refuses to quiet down?
Right, when they push back.
We have to transition to the external threat. We have quieted the internal mind, but now we face the persistent coworker or the demanding client who simply won't accept your first no.
The source material identifies this archetype as the persistent asker. And it's important to understand the psychology of this person.
Yeah, what's their deal?
Well, they are not necessarily being malicious or intentionally disrespectful. Often they are just incredibly single-minded and task-oriented.
Okay.
When you give them a no, they don't hear stop. They hear not this way. They view your boundary as a puzzle to be solved.
Wow.
So they come back asking the exact same fundamental question, but packaged in a slightly different way.
They probe the perimeter looking for a weakness. Like, are you sure you can't just do an hour? What if we push the deadline to Tuesday? Could you just look over this one small section?
Exactly. They are trying to find the crack in the armor.
And the guide gives us a very specific required strategy for this dynamic, the broken record technique.
It's a foundational concept in assertiveness training, and it's crucial because it addresses the core vulnerability most of us have in these interactions.
The technique essentially means you calmly, clearly, and neutrally repeat your original no without getting drawn into a debate.
Right.
If they ask, can you just help for an hour? You don't offer a new reason why you can't. You simply say, as I mentioned, I'm not able to take that on right now, but I appreciate you asking.
And if they push again,
You respond, my answer is still the same, I'm afraid. Just over and over.
we have to explore why this is so incredibly difficult to execute in practice, though.
Because it feels so rude.
It does. When someone pushes back on our boundary, our deep-seated instinct is to justify it. We feel this overwhelming urge to explain ourselves.
We want to be understood. We want them to say, oh, I see your point. You are completely justified in saying no to me. We want their validation to relieve our own internal guilt.
And that desire for validation is a huge psychological trap. The text highlights it as one of the most dangerous things you can do.
The absolute rule here is never offer a new excuse.
Never. The moment you provide an explanation like, oh, an hour is hard because I have to pick up my kids from school and the traffic is terrible, you think you are defending your position.
Right, you think you're being reasonable.
You think you are providing logical evidence that your no is valid. But strategically, what you're actually doing is giving the persistent asker a brand new problem to solve.
Oh, you have to pick up your kids. No problem at all. I can format the document so you can review it on your phone while you're sitting in the car line.
Exactly. You haven't defended your boundary. You have handed them a map to bypass it. You have turned a hard limit into a negotiation.
And you lose.
The source uses the phrase to cede ground. When you explain, justify, or offer excuses, you are ceding your positional advantage. You are inviting them to judge whether your excuse is good enough.
And to a persistent asker, no excuse is ever good enough if it stands in the way of their goal.
Exactly.
I was thinking about this dynamic and I realized it's exactly like being in a leaky boat.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Imagine your boundary is a boat and you are trying to stay afloat in the middle of a lake. When you just say a clear, neutral no, your hull is solid. It's completely impenetrable. The water, which is the persistent asker, just splashes harmlessly against the side.
Nice and dry.
Right.
Yeah.
But the moment you feel uncomfortable and decide to offer an excuse like, I can't help because I'm too busy today, you just drilled a hole in your own boat.
The water starts rushing in.
And the persistent asker, their whole goal is to sink your no and get you moving in their direction. So they see the hole and they say, oh, you're busy. I can easily take these other two minor tasks off your plate so you have time to do this one.
They solved it.
They just plugged your hole. They solved your excuse. So what do? You panic because you still don't want to do the task and you drill another hole.
Well, actually, it's not just that I'm busy.
Exactly. Actually, it's that I don't really have the right software installed. And they say, oh, I'll send IT over to install it right now. Plug. Every single explanation is a new hole in the hull.
And the persistent asker is just going to keep excitedly plugging those holes until you have absolutely no excuses left. Your boat sinks and you have to do what they want.
It's terrifying when you realize you do this to yourself.
The cognitive load of that scenario is exhausting. You are forcing your brain to frantically invent new, plausible excuses in real time while managing the stress of the confrontation.
It's so stressful.
The broken record technique prevents this entirely. The broken record is the solid hull. It offers no holes to plug.
As I mentioned, I am unable to take this on. Splash. It just hits the hull.
What's truly fascinating here is how this technique fundamentally alters the chemistry of the conversation. Human interaction is a feedback loop. We feed off the data the other person provides.
Okay.
When you use the broken record, you are starving the persistent asker of data.
Yeah.
You strip the emotion out of the negotiation. There is no new information for them to work with. There is no new problem to solve.
You are just a brick wall. But I have to imagine that when you first start doing this, the persistent asker doesn't just immediately give up, right?
No, they don't. And this is a crucial concept in behavioral psychology known as an extinction burst.
An extinction burst.
Yes. When you stop rewarding a behavior, in this case. When you stop giving them excuses to argue with the behavior, will often get worse before it gets better.
They double down.
They will push harder. They might get visibly frustrated. They are testing to see if the old rule still applies. You have to weather that extinction burst.
Just hold the line.
If you hold firm with the broken record, eventually the conversation is forced to an abrupt end. Not through a screaming match, but through sheer conversational starvation. They simply have nowhere else to go.
It's almost anticlimactic in the best way possible. You refuse to play the game, and eventually they take their ball and go home.
Exactly.
Okay, so the broken record is fantastic for a persistent peer or a client or an acquaintance. But let's elevate the stakes a bit. We have to look at high-stakes workplace dynamics.
The boss.
What happens when the person doing the asking signs your paychecks?
This changes the calculus entirely. The power dynamic shifts the rules of engagement.
Because repeating yourself like a broken record to your boss who is demanding a project gets done. That's not asserting a healthy boundary. That is a fast track to getting fired.
Right, you can't do that.
If your manager says, I need this quarterly report by Friday, you cannot just calmly repeat, as I mentioned, my answer is still the same. I am unable to take that on.
The strategy absolutely must pivot here. You are dealing with a power hierarchy where your access to resources, your income, is controlled by the person making the request.
The evolutionary threat level is extremely high.
Very high. A direct, unvarnished no to a superior triggers their own authority reflex.
The source material addresses this head-on. It notes that saying no to a boss requires shifting away from a direct confrontational no into a collaborative yes and or yes but.
It frames the entire interaction not as a refusal of work, but as a strategic issue of prioritization.
The text provides a highly specific script for this exact scenario, and I have to say it is a masterclass in managing up.
Let's hear it.
The script goes, yes, I can absolutely take that on. To make sure it gets the attention it needs, could you help me prioritize? Right now, I'm working on Project A and Project B. Should this new task take precedence over those?
It's brilliant.
Wait, look at the very first word in that script, though. It's yes. If our entire goal today is learning the art of saying no, aren't we just completely caving here? Aren't we just doing exactly what we are trying to stop doing?
It looks like a concession on the surface, but functionally, it is a highly sophisticated boundary.
How so?
Let's look at the vocabulary the source uses to describe what you're trying to avoid, being labeled insubordinate. Insubordinate is a very dangerous word in a corporate environment. It means being disobedient to authority.
Yeah, you don't want that on your performance review.
If you say a flat no, you risk that label. By starting with, yes, I can absolutely take that on, you completely neutralize the threat of insubordination.
Okay, I see.
You are demonstrating willingness, alignment, and obedience. You are not fighting them. You are standing shoulder to shoulder with them, looking at the work.
Okay, so the yes lowers their defenses, but how does that actually protect my time?
It relies on a fundamental truth of the workplace. Bosses rarely know the full granular extent of your daily workload.
That is so true.
They operate at the macro level. You operate at the micro level. They have a blind spot regarding your actual minute-to-minute capacity. When they drop a new task on your desk, they aren't usually trying to crush you maliciously. They just see a resource and allocate a task to it.
So by asking them to help prioritize between Project A, Project B, and the new task, you are illuminating their blind spot without sounding like you are complaining.
Right.
You aren't whining about being overworked. You are just presenting neutral data.
And most importantly, you are shifting the cognitive burden of prioritization back onto them. They are the manager. Managing resources is literally their job description.
Oh, that's good.
You are forcing them to actively manage the resource, which is your finite time. You are saying yes to the work in the abstract, but practically, you are forcing a no onto one of the other projects.
Opportunity cost. You are introducing the economic concept of opportunity cost right into the conversation.
Exactly. Time is finite. By making the boss choose the priority, you are making them explicitly acknowledge the consequences of the new yes. If they say the new task is priority number one, they are implicitly and knowingly saying no to Project A or Project B getting done this week. You make the invisible cost undeniably visible.
I see how this completely transforms the dynamic. If I am just an order taker, a subordinate, I say, okay, boss, I'll get it done. And then I secretly work until midnight. My family suffers and I resent my job. I absorb the entire cost of their blind spot.
Which leads to burnout.
But if I use this prioritization script, I'm elevating myself. I sound like a strategic partner managing a portfolio of work.
You move from being reactive to being proactive. If you just take orders and absorb the overload, eventually you will drop a ball. You will miss a deadline or deliver subpar work because you are stretched too thin.
And that damages trust.
By forcing prioritization, you protect the quality of the output, which protects the trust. The source notes a fascinating outcome of this approach. It builds immense professional respect.
Wait, really? Pushing back builds respect.
Bosses respect employees who manage their own capacity rigorously and who understand the strategic goals of the team well enough to ask priority-based questions.
Saying no to a boss isn't about refusal. It's about holding up a mirror to reality. There are only 24 hours in a day. We have to choose how we spend them together. That is incredibly empowering.
It is the difference between surviving your workload and actively managing your career.
Man. Okay, so we've conquered the workplace, we've navigated the professional high-stakes arena, but now the source material pivots us to the ultimate emotional high-stakes arena.
Family.
Managing a boss is ultimately about workload and performance metrics. You can quantify it. Managing family is about deep, complex, lifelong emotional ties. It is subjective, deeply ingrained, and fraught with history.
If the workplace is tricky, family is a minefield.
You can use logic with a boss, but family members have a master's degree in pushing your specific guilt buttons because they are the ones who installed the buttons in the first place.
It's so true. Family systems operate on a principle of homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
Yes. The system wants to remain stable. It wants things to stay the way they've always been. When you start setting boundaries, you are changing your behavior, which disrupts the homeostasis of the family unit.
You're rocking the boat.
The family system will instinctively try to pull you back into your old role to stabilize things. And the text points out the most common tactic used to bypass boundaries in these relationships. It is the use of the ultimate override code. But we're family.
Oh, the trump card. I know you're exhausted and you've worked 60 hours this week, but it's your cousin's baby shower, and we're family. You have to be there.
It is incredibly heavy.
The implication is that because of blood or history, standard boundaries do not apply to us. If you assert a limit, you aren't just managing your time, you are betraying the tribe. How do we navigate a situation where the emotional ransom is that high?
The text introduces a crucial semantic and psychological shift here. The concept of establishing loving boundaries.
Loving boundaries, that sounds almost contradictory.
We often view boundaries as inherently hostile acts. We view them as walls built to keep people away. But a loving boundary is rooted in the idea that the no isn't a rejection of the person. It is a necessary limit required to maintain the health of the relationship long term.
You are protecting the relationship from your own future resentment.
Yes. If you always say yes when you want to say no, you will eventually grow to resent the very people you love. To operationalize this, the source provides a 3-part script specifically designed to disarm the we're family defense without triggering a massive conflict.
Let's break this 3-part script down. Part 1.
Step 1. Affirm the relationship. You lead with connection. The example in the text is, I love spending time with you, which is why I want to be fully present when I am.
You are validating their importance before you introduce any friction.
You are bypassing their amygdala. Remember, rejection triggers the threat response. By starting with affirmation, you are signaling safety. You are saying, our core bond is secure. This conversation is not a threat to our attachment.
Okay, the threat level is lowered. What is part 2?
Step 2. State the limitation clearly and without blame. I can't come to the gathering this weekend because I am completely exhausted and I wouldn't be good company.
The phrase, without blame, feels like the linchpin of the whole strategy.
It is entirely the point. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say, I can't come because you guys always stress me out, or because mom always criticizes my life choices.
Right.
The moment you introduce blame, you trigger their defensiveness. The conversation instantly devolves into an argument about who said what or who is at fault. By taking total ownership of the limitation, I am exhausted, you make the boundary about your capacity, not their behavior.
It's an unarguable fact. They cannot debate your internal level of exhaustion. You are neutralizing the argument before it begins.
Okay, so we've affirmed the relationship. We've stated a blameless limit based on our own capacity. What is the final part?
Step 3. Offer a concrete, positive alternative. I can, however, come over for a relaxed dinner next Wednesday. How does that sound? A concrete alternative, not just let's hang out soon, because soon is incredibly vague and it leaves the other person feeling dismissed or brushed off.
A concrete alternative proves that your initial affirmation, "I love spending time with you," was actually genuine. You're closing the door on the massive weekend gathering, but you're immediately opening a window for a Wednesday dinner.
This makes me think of an analogy to explain this loving boundary concept, contrasting it with how we normally picture boundaries.
Oh,
Usually we picture building a massive brick wall between us and our family. We're trying to keep them out. But a brick wall is isolating. You can't see over it. You can't connect through it. It is purely a defensive posture.
a brick wall ends the relationship.
Right. But this three-part script affirmation, blameless limit, concrete alternative isn't a brick wall. A loving boundary is a fence with a gate.
A fence with a gate. Consider the mechanics of that.
The fence defines the property line. It clearly marks what is yours to manage your time, your energy, your mental health. It prevents people from just wandering onto your lawn whenever they please. Exactly.
But it is not a solid wall. You can still see each other, you can still talk over it. And most importantly, there is a gate, and you control the latch. By offering the concrete alternative, "I can come for dinner Wednesday," you are choosing to open the gate and invite them onto your property on your terms when you are rested and ready to be a good host.
That is perfect.
A boundary isn't built to keep your family out forever. It's a tool that allows the relationship to actually thrive on your property without them trampling all over your flower beds when you aren't looking.
That analogy captures the essence perfectly. A boundary without a gate is just isolation. But a gate without a fence is having no sense of self. It's enmeshment. You need both to have a differentiated, healthy relationship.
Absolutely.
The text makes a profound assertion here that we have to linger on. It argues that a true relationship of love and respect is fundamentally one where no is an acceptable answer.
If no is not allowed. If no is not allowed. If every time you set a limit, it is met with anger, guilt trips, or punishment, then you do not have a relationship based on love. You have a relationship based on compliance.
Wow.
You are essentially a hostage to their expectations. The boundary protects the love from being eroded by resentment.
Saying no to the Sunday gathering is actually what saves the relationship so that you can enjoy the Wednesday dinner. It is counterintuitive, but so powerful.
We have successfully navigated the external world. We've managed the persistent peers. We've carefully negotiated prioritization with the boss. We've built fences with gates for our family. We have secured the perimeter.
But the source introduces one final frontier, and it suggests that this might actually be the most difficult arena of all.
We have fought all the external battles, but now we face the final boss.
Because the calls are coming from inside the house.
The internal no, saying no to ourselves.
It is the ultimate pivot in the source material. We spend immense amounts of energy worrying about how to protect our time from other people, but we completely ignore how frequently we sabotage our own time. The text explicitly defines this internal no as the act of saying no to our own worst impulses.
I feel personally attacked by this entire section of the text.
Oh, me too. Because it lists specific, agonizingly relatable examples hitting the snooze button for the 5th time instead of getting up to work out.
A classic failure of the internal boundary.
Mindlessly doom scrolling on social media for an hour when you have highly important work sitting right in front of you. Or, and this is the really insidious one, listening to negative self-talk.
Yes.
That quiet voice in your head that tells you it's too late to start, or you aren't qualified for this promotion, or you're just going to fail anyway. Why is dealing with a snooze button or a doom scrolling habit included in a guide about setting boundaries with other people?
Because the underlying cognitive mechanism is identical. It requires the exact same skill set, just turned inward. The text defines this as self-regulation.
Self-regulation.
Self-regulation is the ultimate meta skill. It is the discipline of controlling one's own behavior, emotions, and thoughts in the pursuit of long-term goals, rather than yielding to short-term impulses.
It's being the boss of your own brain. But why is it so hard? Why can I stand up to a persistent coworker, but I can't put my phone down at 11:00 p.m.?
Because you are fighting billions of years of evolutionary wiring. The impulses you are fighting, the desire for sleep, the desire for the quick dopamine hit of social media, the desire to avoid the hard work of a new project, those are driven by the primitive limbic part of your brain.
The caveman brain again.
Exactly. It seeks immediate gratification and energy conservation. The part of your brain that wants to write the novel, get the promotion, or build a healthy habit is the prefrontal cortex. It is the newer, logical part of the brain responsible for long-term planning.
So it's a literal battle between two different parts of my brain.
Yes. And your limbic system is the ultimate internal persistent asker. It knows all your weaknesses. It knows exactly what excuses you will fall for.
That's terrifying.
When your alarm goes off at 6 a.m., the impulse says, just 15 more minutes. It's cold outside. You worked hard yesterday. Sleep is important for your immune system.
It's the ultimate leaky boat. My own brain will invent 1,000 highly logical reasons why I need to stay in bed. I plug one hole. No, I set the alarm to work out and my brain drills 3 more. But you might be getting a cold and rest is actually more productive.
Which is why you have to apply the broken record technique to your own internal monologue. You have to recognize the internal bargaining and shut it down without ceding ground.
Be a broken record to myself.
You have to acknowledge the impulse without obeying it. I hear that we are tired, but we are getting up anyway. But the text draws a beautiful parallel here that connects this internal struggle back to the foundational premise of the entire guide.
The idea that every no is a yes to something else. We talked about this at the very beginning with the guilt hangover.
Exactly. The text lays it out perfectly. Saying no to distraction is saying yes to focus. Saying no to procrastination is saying yes to progress. Saying no to negative self-talk is saying yes to your own potential.
That reframing is essential. Because otherwise, self-discipline just feels like self-punishment.
Right.
If I'm sitting at my desk and I just think, I can't look at my phone, I feel deprived. I feel like I am missing out. The limbic system rebels. But if I reframe it and think, I am intentionally saying no to this mindless scrolling so that I can say yes to finishing this project, feeling proud of myself, and actually logging off at 5:00 p.m., the no suddenly has immense tangible value.
It transforms from an act of deprivation into an act of investment. You are investing the energy you save by saying no into the yes that actually matters to you. And this is where the two halves of our deep dive truly synthesize.
So if we look at the entire equation we've built today, the coworkers, the bosses, the family, and our own brains, how does it all fit together?
Mastering the external no. Setting boundaries with your peers. Managing up with your boss. Holding loving limits with your family. That difficult work buys you the raw material. It buys you the time.
Okay.
It clears the space on your calendar. It secures the perimeter of your property. But mastering the internal no, the self-regulation, that is what determines what you actually build on that property.
Yeah.
It allows you to use that time effectively.
If you master the external but fail the internal, you just end up sitting in an empty room. You've successfully fought off your family and your boss. You have a totally clear Saturday, but you waste the entire afternoon staring at a screen because you couldn't say no to your own dopamine craving.
You are ultimately the gatekeeper of your own life. You control who comes through the gate, and you control what happens on the property once it is secure.
As we wrap up this incredible journey through the source material today, I want to trace the massive ground we've covered. Because saying no is clearly not just a simple conversational tactic, it is a profoundly multi-layered life skill.
It's foundational.
We started by validating the very real physiological reality of the no-guilt hangover. We explored the evolutionary biology of the amygdala and learned to distinguish between a legitimate moral failure and the temporary, entirely expected burn of social conditioning.
We learned that the soreness means the neural pathway is growing.
We tackled the external pushback of the persistent asker, learning to protect our leaky boats with the solid hull of the broken record technique. We learned the danger of ceding ground by offering new excuses that just give them new problems to solve, and we learned to weather the extinction burst when they push harder.
We elevated our professional game, learning to navigate power dynamics and manage up by shifting the cognitive burden of prioritization back to the boss. We neutralized insubordination by making the invisible opportunity cost undeniably clear.
We navigated the emotional minefield of family homeostasis, building fences with gates instead of isolating brick walls. We used the powerful 3-part script to bypass the amygdala, affirm the relationship, set a blameless limit based on capacity, and offer a concrete alternative.
And finally, we turn the spotlight inward, realizing that fighting the limbic system requires the same broken record technique, reframing self-discipline not as deprivation, but as a profound investment in our own potential.
It is a complete transition from merely being reactive to whatever life throws at you, to being truly intentional with your finite resources. As the source beautifully puts it, mastering the aftermath is the art of living by design, not by default.
Living by design. Now, as we send you back out into the world to practice these skills, I have a final thought for you to chew on. Something that builds on our conversation about family and relationships, but pushes it just a little bit further into the reality of the pushback you might face.
Let's hear it.
The source mentioned that a healthy no prevents resentment, and actually strengthens a relationship long term. But consider this dynamic, especially when you are facing severe, unreasonable pushback. What if the people in your life who get the absolute most angry at your no are the very ones who have been benefiting the most from your lack of boundaries?
Oh, wow.
Their negative reaction, their anger, their intense attempts to induce guilt, it might feel terrible and trigger that hangover in the moment, but it might just be the ultimate hidden proof that your no was entirely necessary for your own well-being. If someone is furious that you are finally protecting your energy, it usually means they were freely consuming that energy without your permission.
If they are furiously mad about the new fence, it's because they really liked trampling your lawn.
That is a heavy, provocative thought to take with you, but a necessary one to remember when the guilt hangover tries to convince you that you made a mistake. Let their anger be the confirmation that your boundary was required.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive into the source material with us today. At the very beginning of this conversation, we talked about that murky, invisible diagnostic landscape right after you say no. You are no longer navigating that silence without a map. You're ready for it.
You understand the brain science. You understand the power dynamics. You have the practical scripts to hold the line. You know how to read the X-ray. The silence doesn't have to be terrifying anymore. It can just be the quiet, peaceful space where your new boundaries are taking root. Have an incredibly intentional week ahead. Protect your time. Use it well. And we will see you back here for the next deep dive.